Hello everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar, which is all around the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines version 2.2. This webinar, as we go through it, should give you some really helpful hints and tips about the new guidelines that have been introduced recently. As a way of introduction, I'm Charlotte Hayes and I'm a Principal Consultant here at Ten10, and I manage our digital testing lab, which is based from the Leeds office. The digital testing service offers a variety of solutions for our clients, so we support the development of new applications or upgrades and help define the best approach for testing and identify defects early on in the software development lifecycle. We also support clients who need some compatibility testing to ensure an existing application will continue to work against new releases for different devices, browsers, operating systems, and we have a big mobile device lab in the office. We're also a really big advocate for ensuring websites or new applications can be accessed by everyone and can meet the industry regulations. So I started delving into the world of accessibility perhaps 4 or so years ago when I was asked to validate a client's website. As the years have gone on, I've really seen the importance of accessibility within digital and how it can often affect people in their daily lives. Things such as filling out an online form or being unable to complete an order for a food shop. Simple things that we often take for granted. Today's agenda, we're going to cover a brief explanation of what accessibility guidelines are. For further detail about all the guidelines, you can download my previous webinar from our website. We're also going to look at what's new in WCAG 2.2, so looking at the features that have been released on the 5th of October. Any questions you have can be answered at the end of the webinar, as well as being available to download this from our website. So this slide is just a quick recap on the guidelines. As already mentioned, further detail about how these guidelines came about can be found in the original webinar available from our website. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.2 have been designed to provide a benchmark to what should be expected of a website that should be accessible. And there are 3 levels of compliance: A, AA and AAA. The first web initiative, WIA, was set up and run by the W3C in the late 90s to promote web accessibility. Then in 1999, the first set of web content accessibility guidelines were produced. So 2.2, as we know, has just come out in October this year and is an extension of the 2.1 guidelines. And we're advised to use 2.2 to maximise the accessibility efforts. So using the most current version of WCAG and when developing or updating your web accessibility policies, websites, web products. So what's new in WCAG 2.2? So these slides that I'm about to go through are the new features that have been introduced for these new guidelines. One is obsolete, and the following 9 are new features to the guidelines. These are the new features and they can be found in the different types of guidelines. So navigable, input modalities, predictable and input assistance. As you can see, there are some AA, AAA and A level requirements that have changed. And there is the parsing that's now become obsolete and removed, but these will be shown and in a bit more detail about how you could test these. This guideline, parsing, has now been removed. It has been deemed obsolete. So parsing is all about writing clean code, so HTML, CSS or JavaScript, so that it's understood by browsers and assistive technologies as they rely on that code and render the necessary information to the users. When you parse, you break up a sentence or group of words into separate components, including the definition of each part's function or form. So parsing was introduced in the initial 2.0 guidelines, but assistive technology now relies on the browser, so it is no longer needed. So other guidelines such as name, role, value, where the information is conveyed to assistive technology, can now often fail. There are two versions of this criterion, one at level AA and one at level AAA, which is the following slide we will talk through. For this guideline, you must not let anything fully obscure the element which has keyboard focus. Examples of this are modals, adverts, sticky headers or footers, which often appear on a higher layer than the rest of the page. When you move the keyboard focus to an element, you must be able to see at least a portion of the focus indicator at all times. This criterion deliberately uses the phrase partially obscured intentionally so that you will not fail if something overlaps slightly, as long as you can still tell what has focus. This example, you cannot read the last word that has focus. Also, the example below shows that you can see what has focus and is visible to the user, so this is the correct way. This could impact people who can't use a mouse and need to see what has keyboard focus. This criterion for AAA states that the focus indicator must always be fully visible, which is slightly different to what we just discussed in the 2.411 AA, which allows us to be partially obscured. You can see the example here of something being visible under a banner, but the user cannot see it. This would fail the criterion. Having something visible and has keyboard focus would pass. So in summary, if your keyboard focus is at any point fully obscured, you fail the 2.411 and it can't be AA compliant. If it's partially obscured, you pass the 2.411 and you can be AA compliant. But if it's never obscured, you pass the 2.412 and can be AAA compliant. This criterion is for AAA and should help many people who cannot see small changes in appearance when using the keyboard to highlight areas across the site. A user such as someone with low contrast sensitivity or an older person should be able to see where they are at any point on the site when they move around the website. This guideline ensures the contrast should be at least 3:1 between focused and unfocused states, or a thick perimeter around the state. The examples on this slide show the focus visible colour does not meet that 3:1 contrast. To pass the focus indicator should be of sufficient size and contrast for the user. This guideline is for level AA, dragging movement. So this looks at people who are dragging and dropping items around the site. There are some people who cannot drag and drop items using a mouse. So this guideline ensures there are up and down arrows to change the order and the arrows to move the items around, like the example shown on the right hand side of this slide, so you can use either a mouse or a keyboard. This new guideline, Target Size, allows people to select buttons across the site and make sure they aren't too close together or too small. There are some people with physical impairments that cannot click small buttons that are close together and have problems seeing them. So this criterion ensures that the buttons have sufficient space to click Submit, for example. There are some specific spacing and sizing requirements that need to be tested as part of this criterion. See the examples on this slide, where the first example shows a list where the words are small text and grouped quite close together. The other example shows larger and more spaced out lists on the site, which would pass. This next criterion is for level A only and is really useful across websites where people need help to either find an item or understand the site or ask a question. This guideline ensures that any help or chat options across the site are in the same lower right corner across all pages to make the site consistent. Having a consistent area for help or chat across the site allows ease of use for people and gives the user a good experience of using the site and return custom, hopefully. The examples of this slide show the chat in different places, which would inevitably fail. And here is another level A criterion, redundant entry. So some people that have cognitive disabilities have difficulty remembering what they've entered beforehand. So take this example here. We have repetitive input, so country of residence, for example. It would be useful when you're designing a website to make sure that either the app automatically fills in information that they've entered in previous steps, so they're not asking for the same information twice, or that the form is developed in a way that you're only asking for the same information once. This next criterion is a AA level, which is accessible authentication, and then there is a AAA accessible authentication on another slide, which we will talk about later. So some people that have cognitive disabilities can't solve puzzles or memorize a username or password, so they find it hard to log into accounts. So what would work well with a minimum AA, hopefully in these examples you can see. So if you go into an app, you can put your email address in, you go into your email and then click a link, and the email, you can then log straight into the app. So it doesn't ask you for a password, but all it asks you is to enter in your email address. So here, this would pass for a minimum AA. So this accessible authentication criterion is AAA. So again, quite similar to the previous one. It is people with cognitive disabilities who can't do puzzles or identify objects. So if the app is asking them to click on pictures of cats, but they can't tell what's a cat, for example, they would have real issues logging onto an app or a site. So a way for this criterion to pass is to be able to allow the copy and paste function on the password, so that someone can copy and paste their password, so they don't have to recognize images or media, and they can just do that simple copy and paste. So this would be the AAA criterion. Thank you for your time, and if there are any questions, there is a button below this video where you can click to send me an email, and then I will respond and get back to you. Thanks very much.